actually in teaching, so I'm going to start with a question. How many of you here, and this might sound silly, but how many of you here own a mobile phone, a cell phone? Raise your hand, really high. All right, this is obvious, right? Go ahead and put your hands down. But if you go to any place in Kenya, a rural village, the same exact thing would happen. And that's where the idea of MPrep came from. Now, as I said, I've been a teacher now going on 7 years, actually close to 8. And I also had the really fortunate opportunity of living in a hut for a year in rural Kenya. So I want to tell you about how we use extremely simple mobile technology, phones that look like this and cost $10, to change the educational landscape in Kenya. So this idea started in a hut. And it was a pretty nice hut, actually. This was my hut back in Muhuru Bay, Kenya. This was my room. And as you can see, we didn't have water or electricity. But we did have a lot of fun. That's actually my mama right there. This was a very vibrant community that worked hard and loved life. And the idea of MPrep was actually inspired by Daniel. Daniel was my Luo Omera. He was my brother. He was in 7th grade, and I lived with him in this hut. And as you can see, he was a pretty good student. And that was me back in 2008. I was working really hard at the time to actually, I was working with about 400 students in the community that looked like this in order to help improve their exam scores. But the idea from Daniel came from the fact that these students actually had to pass primary school exit exams in order to get to high school. And less than 1/8 of these students even made it to high school. So at first I said, hey, let's give them all books. Bad idea. Books are expensive. They get ruined very easily. They're overwhelming to students. And as any kid knows, and any good teacher should know, books are actually incredibly boring to use. In the end, the program that I had started had really helped to improve test scores, but my brother Daniel failed. So this haunted me as I went back to the US. And I actually came back to Kenya in about 2011, actually a little bit over a year ago now. And I kept seeing the same problem occurring: little access to resources, little quality for revision tools, and very little engagement for students. But something was different in Kenya in 2011. Everyone I saw had a mobile phone by that point. When I went to visit Daniel, he was sitting there texting with his friends on his mobile phone in our hut. He was playing Snake on the phone. He was calling up people. So I thought to myself at that point, well, what if the kids could just study on the mobile phones? So as a teacher, so then I did a little research, actually, before we even did anything. And in our village, a village that was 45 kilometers away from a paved road, that didn't have water or electricity, that had an HIV/AIDS rate of 38%. 95% of the kids that I surveyed had access to a mobile phone at home. It was incredible. So as a teacher, I thought to myself, what's the simplest thing that we can put on the phone? And we thought of this idea of content-aligned quizzes. Really simple quizzes that were aligned to the entire curriculum. We made it interactive so that the kids got individualized feedback. And then we also added some gaming components to the quizzes where the kids were competing against one another. So you can see this was a huge value add for the kids, because not only was it exactly what their teachers wanted them to be doing, but also it was fun. So that's where the idea of MPrep came from. And in February 2012, instead of being at business school, I actually had started working on this full time, and we launched it to students in Kenya. We haven't turned back since then. And so it began. Kids from all the way from the coast of Mombasa, which is on the Indian Ocean, to the most rural parts of Kenya began studying on mobile phones. And they loved it. So right now we have around 6,000 Kenyan students at over 325 schools across the entire country, some of them even in refugee camps, that are using this tool to study. It's pretty amazing. And By the end of 2013, we're projecting to actually have 100,000 students by this point. So we're reaching a point where we're actually going viral within Kenya. We've had some unintended side effects that I didn't realize, and as a teacher I was extremely proud of. One is the fact is that the kids actually work together. They have collaborative learning on this phone, and they spend a lot of time thinking about the questions. Through the SMS lag time, so text messaging on the phone, they actually start to retain information better. So SMS is actually a pretty cool technology. And then came an enormous amount of data. We can actually tell how a student is doing in every single nuanced topic in the entire curriculum of Kenya, and we have data on the entire country. So we actually have more information about how students are doing in Kenya than the Ministry of Education. And whoops, they don't really like that too much. Teachers are also now subscribing to us. They're buying the data from us so that they know how their students are doing. Parents are, in even the most remote regions of Kenya, are doing the same exact thing. And what I've seen is that things have started to change in Kenya. Kids are studying everywhere. Adults are more engaged in the education process. And that a community is actually being started around mobile phones and using them in and out of the classroom. A student like Lynette spends her weekends studying at home with her mobile phone and her friends. And a community is also being created in which all of the stakeholders in education actually understand what's going on with their students. So what I've learned from all of this is that you don't need fancy technology. Sometimes what people already have works. So if you focus on what's already working, it works. So studying is no longer about pen and paper anymore in Kenya. Kids are learning in an entirely different way. Teachers are teaching in a different way. And the possibility to scale this is actually pretty endless. In Kenya, we're seeing that the market opportunity is 10 million, in East Africa, 30 million, and throughout the developing world, it's billions. What this has taught me is sometimes simplicity is the most revolutionary idea. Thank you.